So this has been really like a private battle and a secret struggle that they've really been facing. And so even in getting out, like, it really had to be between them and God giving them the wisdom and strategy to make this great escape. So yeah, so he had said, if I had just ended things from that first conversation, I wouldn't have went through all of this. So, in the beginning, like, obviously, like, when the enemy sends something counterfeit, it's gonna look appealing and nice. The enemy comes as an angel of light, so like he's not gonna send something that's blatantly obvious that it's, from the enemy. It's gonna look appealing. That's what even happened when, you know, in the beginning when Eve was deceived. The fruit looked good to eat, and the enemy was just Satan was just talking about that and like, oh, the benefits of of eating of the fruit, even though God said don't eat it. And so, she was very appealing in the beginning. And things started off well, and that might have been the case as well with your spouse and the counterfeit. Like, they looked like a really great person, and they got along in the beginning, and things seemed like really great, and like they could see a future with them. But then this point came in the movie where, she wanted marriage with him, and he wasn't ready for that commitment. And so your spouse might have already had a difficult time with commitment in the past, but their experience with them might have just made it worse or more difficult, because of them just kind of putting pressure on them to, make these significant decisions in this short period of time. So he's basically saying, if I had just said no from that point, then, I wouldn't have been through all of this, because she had kind of said, like, if you're not, marrying me, then that means you don't want to be with me. And he's like, no, I'm not saying I don't want to be with you. So it was just like a lot of her putting words into his mouth. But if he had just said, like, I don't want to be with you, then, that would have kind of, lessened the blow of everything that he had to go through. But there was a point when they did have an argument, and he did say that he wanted space, and she kind of again like just flipped his words and just made it seem like he was making these statements that he wasn't making. And so even in, like your spouse's relationship with the counterfeit, like even if they expressed that they wanted space, like, the counterfeit just didn't respect that or understand that. They were just like, just interpreting it as, them just not wanting to be with them anymore, and they don't want that. Like, they don't want to accept that. So and that's also like kind of what happened in the other word I talked about, the first movie, where or actually the second movie, this the movie A Cinderella Story, where he tried to break up with her, and she was just like, you're just having a bad day, you're just, not feeling like yourself, like just get yourself together and we're gonna, go the way things have always been. So basically it's almost like they're not taking no for an answer. Like, this is what it is, like, you're gonna be with me, and if you're not, then you're gonna suffer for it. So it's been a very like trying time for these prodigal spouses. So yeah, so Seth had said that to Larry, if I just ended things from that first conversation, I wouldn't have went through all this. So basically some of the spouses delayed in cutting things off, and they were kind of more focused on pleasing the counterfeit than pleasing God, which bit them in the butt. So I also wanted to talk about what bit them in the butt means. It's also termed as come back to bite you. So this term means that a past, often negligent action or decision has unexpectedly returned to cause negative consequences or problems later. It describes facing the uncomfortable results of one's own mistakes or shortcuts. So it's like similar to like backfiring consequences. The action had the opposite of the desired effect, and basically you're reaping what you sow. That is really what they experienced. They may have thought this decision was fine and their choice, but they have reaped from that decision, and it has caused them these consequences that they weren't expecting. So when I said this, it made me think about the phrase "nip it in the bud." So the meaning of nip it in the bud, it's to stop something immediately so that it does not become a worse problem. It also says to stop something before it has an opportunity to become established. Um, it's to stop a potential problem, habit, or situation immediately at an early stage before it grows, escalates, or become a major issue. So this is what the spouses failed to do earlier on in the relationship with the counterfeit. So yeah, so they didn't want to cut things off when they had the opportunity to, and so that just really they kind of had to reap what they sowed because of that disobedience and because of the idolatry and them wanting to keep this person around. And even if they reached the point where they didn't want to keep them around, they didn't have the capacity or the courage or the ability to fully sever the ties. And so that really just brought on more problems. And yeah, there was a point where they were more focused on pleasing the counterfeit than pleasing God, because you know when you choose God, you're essentially saying no to whatever else is not of him or from him. But they didn't say yes to what God was showing them, to what God was giving them. And so they were, by saying yes to the counterfeit, they were essentially saying no to what God wanted for them. Yeah, like I mentioned, the time that the Lord wanted me to watch the movie was at 5:56. And so I looked up 556 in Strong's Concordance, and in Greek, it means to drive away, to send away, or to expel. And that is what God is doing with the counterfeits. He is driving them out. They are being sent away. They are being expelled. And so, just reading from the Topsical Lexicon, it says, the verb behind Strong's Greek 556 conveys decisive dismissal, forcing something or someone to leave a place or position of influence. It carries an authoritative, not a polite departure, but an authoritative removal. I also want to mention that this is something that your spouse may have done at one point. They may have basically drove you away or kind of expelled you from their life, and kind of similarly with God as well, just making this decision to kind of cause the separation, and then making that decision kind of made God have to create this separation between you, because of the free will and the choice that they made. But now they're realizing what they truly did, and now God is going to be the one driving away everything and everyone that is not from him, so that you and your spouse can be reconciled, reunited, and established in the land that he has promised you. So this is really them not tolerating basically the nonsense anymore, and God. And the other meaning for 556 in Strong's Hebrew means strength or might. So it functions as a pledge of ultimate salvation, foreshadowing the final triumph of God's kingdom. So basically, with this, God is saying, like, God's kingdom is going to remain. God's kingdom is going to rule and be established at the end of it all. And the gates of hell shall not prevail. And so with this, God is giving your spouse the courage to finally cut things off, to finally walk away, to finally say no to the counterfeit. And if, regardless, like, God is removing them. The counterfeit is being driven out. The counterfeit is being expelled. They're just not going to be able to continue to keep up with what they've been doing. So, one of the meanings for 556 means to expel. And the word expel means to officially force someone to leave a place, or to physically force something out. It often implies a permanent or serious removal, such as a disciplinary action. So this is what God is doing. And so basically, when he left her at the altar, she shot him, but after she shot him, she got arrested. So the police came and they arrested her. Even when she was in her wedding dress, she was arrested. And he was put into the ambulance, and he was basically like rushed to the hospital. And even as, she's being put in the police car, he's being put in the ambulance, and, they're both shouting at each other, you know. And so that's just really, God confirming again that the counterfeit is being driven away. The counterfeit is being removed. They're being arrested, so they no longer have the ability to continue to, control and manipulate your spouse. So to arrest, like the word to arrest, because she was arrested, she was put in handcuffs, and it's the legal authorized act of taking a person into custody to answer for a suspected crime. So, they're going to have to answer for what they've done, because at the end of the day, although yes, like these spouses have rebelled against God in some way, at the end of the day, God is restoring them, and they are still his sons and daughters. And so for them to be putting their hands on a child of God, like they are going to have to answer for it. It's the seizure or detention of a person, typically by police, to answer a criminal charge or prevent further offenses. So they can no longer, commit these offenses, So yeah, they're being arrested. And so Seth was put into the ambulance, and with this, basically, like, your spouse is in need of critical care after their ordeal. So this has been very, like, traumatic for them. This has been very chaotic for them. They, when he got shot, he fell to the ground and he wasn't able to walk. So he was crawling. And so, yes, your spouse is going to be making their way to you, but, it has been challenging for them. So they may not be like walking or running, towards you. Like it's kind of like a slow crawl, because, they've really experienced injury and harm from being in, this controlling relationship with the counterfeit. And so, like, that's why God has been, if you're a stander, God has been preparing your heart and having you be gentle with them and receive them when they return, because, they need that critical care. They're in a lot of pain, and they're just kind of in this weak and vulnerable place. So just looking at like what emergency means, because an ambulance comes when there's an emergency, and so there's an urgent need for assistance or relief, and it's an unexpected and usually dangerous situation that calls for immediate action. So basically, the spouses are in this place where they recognize that they need relief, and they need assistance. They can't keep doing things on their own. They can't keep, trying to, live according to their own will or their own way. They need the help of God to escape and to get through, all of this and get out of the situation.